the soul is fully aware, fully conscious, fully blossomed, and the mind is just, yeah, the mind is just like, yeah, 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 this is good, you know.
Reggie raised his hand.
Yes, Reggie, go ahead.
So, in line with the mind can be your friend or that mind can be an enemy. So, I posted that paragraph out of that book I'm reading this
Mm,
morning. And it, in the next paragraph, it goes on to talk about how um, as things flow down the river, most of them wash up on the shore. So my thought is we can learn to control our mind and be like fish and we stay in the river, or we can let our mind control us and then we're just a piece of flotsam that washes up on the bank. The
yeah,
river being the spiritual path.
very beautiful. Very beautiful. Prabhupada actually uses another analogy, which is one of my favorite analogies. He says, there are these huge elephants, and sometimes when they enter into a water or a river which is swiftly flowing, it can get completely washed away by that water.
Especially if there is a like surge of water because of rain, torrential rain.
Yeah, the huge elephant, the massive, but they can be washed away. But this tiny little fish, it can just swim in that water, and it can even go upstream or downstream, and it's not at all bothered. And what's the difference? Because that little fish has actually taken shelter of that water, so is now, it's just, completely free. So in the same way, as long as we are trying to um, control matter or trying to enjoy matter, we are washed away by the sheer force. But once we take shelter of the spiritual vibration of Krishna, then we can just swim in, and that current will not scare us. That force will not scare us anymore. Instead, we'll just swim happily. So it's 7:59.
We can take one more
One
reflection.
last reflection. Yeah.
I was thinking with what we read with the verses today, how the mind can keep you prisoner, or it can free you.
Yeah.
And the difference in differentiating that voice in the mind, that divineness or that fear based or that love based, discerning that voice with clarity so that one doesn't become imprisoned by that negative thought or voice versus being freed by that voice, that encouraging voice.
Yes. Yes. Yes, and we have that power. We have that choice to change that narrative, because the mind. That's another thing. I'm glad that you brought that up. That's another thing the mind does, is constantly criticizing us. It's our worst critique, right? It's constantly telling us that we are not good. This is what, this da da da. It just goes on and on and on and on. And sometimes we don't know how to switch it off. But what happens is, through the practice of bhakti, we are able to see ourselves not through the lens of the mind, which is always critical, but through the lens of Krishna, who's always compassionate and who's always seeing us with just eyes that are anointed with the salve of love.
As if we are the most important person in
The
this
most
universe.
beautiful, right?
The most beautiful, the most important, the most talented.
Yeah.
Most everything.
So then we start seeing ourselves through a whole other lens. And then the mind just says, all right, I better shut up now. I don't hold a chance here. So that's actually, because we hear so much about how important it is to also practice self-compassion and self-love. And actually, this is the best way. We ourselves cannot love ourselves as much as we can be loved, when the supreme consciousness wants to love us. It's like, I was thinking the other day, it's like a tiny drop gets inundated by this big huge ocean, right? It's like this tsunami, right? Versus, just a tiny little drop that is us. So I've kind of taken what you said, Christina, and but I
Right. So we'll start our presentation. We finished chapter 5 in the last session, and the next couple of sessions we'll finish chapter 6. Chapter 6 is about Ashtanga Yoga. We won't go so much into detail in that, but we'll have two main presentations in chapter 6. The first one is on mind, because Ashtanga Yoga is a lot about focusing the mind. and to focus it on the super soul ultimately, to achieve that union with the super soul. That is the purpose of Ashtanga yoga.
Ashtanga is actually what we generally know as yoga to be,
Right.
right? The physical yoga or the different asanas. But there are, the reason it's called Ashtanga is because there are 8 limbs to it. Ashta means 8 and Anga means limbs. So because there are 8 limbs, so that's why it's called Ashtanga. So
we'll the gist of Ashtanga yoga is to control the mind, or tame the mind, or make it our friend. So we'll focus on mind tonight, and our next session will be on the yoga ladder. So Krishna talks about the yoga ladder, that how what are the different kinds of yoga systems, and ultimately he declares that how bhakti yoga is the best in his opinion. So we'll cover the yoga ladder. What are the different
next
systems
session.
in the next session? So that will kind of will be our take on chapter 6, and we'll take it from there.
So I'm going to say something about this. Oh yeah, the yoga. Remember the Yoga Sutras?
Yeah.
By Patanjali, he talks about this, how the purpose of yoga is to actually still the mind,
Yes.
to remove all kinds of vrittis or disturbances in the mind.
Take on chapter
So the
6,
mind,
and
it's,
we'll take it from there.
it's the most important topic. So I'm going to say something about this.
It's
Oh yeah,
one of
the
the most
yoga.
important
Remember the Yoga
topics,
Sutras?
Yeah.
Is by
You know, I
Patanjali.
think
He
there
talks
is
about this, how the purpose of
from
yoga is
top
to
of it,
actually
right? They
still the
found the
mind,
enemy and it's us.
to remove all kinds of
There seemed to be an echo coming
There's an
from
echo.
vrittis or disturbances in the mind. Let's see.
Okay, do you still hear the echo?
Is it still there?
No,
No,
it's
it's gone
not.
now.
Chapter
So the
6,
mind.
and
So,
we'll take it from there.
this
It's
is
the most
actually there's a
important
section in
topic.
Srimad
So
Bhagavatam
say
also.
something about this.
Oh
It's
yeah,
one of
the
the most
yoga.
important
Remember the Yoga
topics.
Sutras?
Oh,
Is by
Mataji,
Patanjali. He
there's
talks
an
about this,
echo.
how
It's
the
coming
purpose
from
of
another
yoga is
source.
to actually still the mind,
Oh,
to
really?
remove all
Previous
kinds of
conversation is being
uh,
seemed to be an echo coming
There's an
from
echo.
vrittis or disturbances in the mind. Let's see. There are 2.
No, okay. Do you still hear the echo?
Is it still there?
It wasn't an echo. It was like almost coming from another source.
Yeah, yeah,
Got it,
yeah. Got
according
it, got it.
Got it.
Yeah, we corrected it. Now it should be okay, right?
It's okay now.
Yes, thank you. So there is this little boy, Prahlad, who is being traumatized by his father, who's this great big demon. And, he just wants to kill his son because his son will not accept his sort of supremacy. And he's this great devotee and just the most amazing, young boy. And so finally the father says, like, he says, Lord Vishnu is the greatest enemy. And he's just always thinking in terms of friends and enemy. So at that point, Prahlad says, actually, there's no greater enemy than an uncontrolled mind, my dear father. So he tells him that, actually, you're so worried about friend and enemy and how this person is going to come and disturb us and kill us or finish you off. But actually, it's our own mind. So.
So these are 2 verses that we went over today. We'll just repeat them for the sake of those who joined just a little bit later.
One,
Yeah, go ahead.
One must deliver himself with the help of his mind and not degrade himself. The mind is the friend of the conditioned soul and his enemy as well. For him who has conquered the mind is the best of friends. But for one who has failed to do so, his mind will remain the greatest enemy. Exactly what Prahlad says. So this is from Srimad Bhagavatam, and I really, really love this particular verse. It's from the 11th canto, 23rd chapter, 47th verse. And it says that all the senses have been under the control of the mind since time immemorial, and the mind himself or herself never comes under the sway of any other. He is stronger than the strongest, and his godlike power is fearsome. Therefore, anyone who can bring the mind under control becomes the master of all the senses. So this is actually the process, because what we are dealing with is not an ordinary thing. It is ultimately, the energy of God, right? It's the material energy of God.
It's like a very powerful element of Krishna's creation that that we are accompanying. and it's a tool. It's like a nuclear bomb in the hand of a child almost.
Yeah, I just had a thought,
Right.
that Krishna says, right, that, earth, water, fire, air, ether, mind, intelligence, and false ego. These are
Mind,
each,
energy.
yeah, these are 8 separated energies, right? Each one is a distinct element. And I just occurred to me that even if I take one of the element, water, and if water decides to become fearsome, you're helpless, right? There's a big flood, or there's a big, if wind, if air decides to become fearsome, we cannot do anything
We have
about it.
hurricane season going on right now, and then we can see the power of
Yeah, the
wind.
fire in California,
Yeah.
right? One thing. And then now we think, as we keep going from gross to subtle, the subtle is actually stronger and stronger and stronger. And then we get to the mind. So if we cannot even control the earth, water, fire, air, how are we going to control this mind?
So it's like the whole of cyclone, the whole of hurricanes, the whole of forest fire, all of that is the power even greater than that is in our own mind.
Yeah, and that's why Arjuna, so here is something that this will actually put things in perspective, that Arjuna, who is Arjuna? So there's a story about Arjuna, that he had a mind that was completely under his control. So there was a test that was actually given by his teacher once, where he placed a sort of a wooden or a fake bird on a tree, and he told all of his disciples to put the bow and the arrow and shoot the eye of the bird. And so, but before they did that, he would ask them a question, each one of them, and he would say, "So what are you seeing? What do you see?" So one of them would say, "Well, I can see the tree, I can see the sky, I can see this, and I can see that." So the teacher would not even let the student shoot the arrow. He would say, "Just leave the bow. You don't have to do it." So finally, when it came to Arjuna's turn, and he was asked the same question, so he raised his bow and his arrow, and he pulled it, and he was ready to shoot. So then the teacher said, "So what do you see, Arjuna?" And Arjuna said, "I don't see anything." He says, "The only thing I see is just the eye of the bird." And so then Drona said, "All right, so now you are fit to actually shoot the arrow," because this was the kind of concentration that Arjuna had. And yet, towards the end of this chapter, when Krishna is going to tell him this whole system, which is based on just trying to control the mind, Arjuna gives it up. He says, "My dear Krishna, I can control the raging wind, but I cannot really control this turbulent mind." So it kind of put things in perspective, that this mind is actually a very, very strong energy that is not so easy to control.
So this is just a video that shows, even according to scientists, they see.
Hey everyone, Jeremy Bennett here. Let's look at how powerful your mind is. Let's compare your mind to the most sophisticated man-made device ever created, the computer. The average computer can hold about 250,000 pictures, 20,000 songs, and
Wait a minute, something happened. You guys can hear the sound
On
from the
It,
video?
it was playing, now it stopped.
now it's just frozen. So stop.
No, you have to turn it on.
hundreds of full-length
Hold on.
It's on
videos.
now.
Nowadays on something the size
But
of
how
my
will we know when
finger.
to stop?
Crazy. But let's compare it to your mind. Your mind can perform an estimated 10 quadrillion operations per second without you even knowing it. Wild. Ask yourself right now, what's making your blood flow throughout your veins with the perfect amount of pressure to keep you alive? What's making your heart beat right now? Are you consciously commanding your heart to beat right now? No. What's maintaining your body core temperature to the perfect degree to keep you alive? What's doing the 6 trillion things to your 60 trillion cells every single second? It's something called your subconscious mind. This is the powerhouse to who you are. Your cat has it, even your puppy has it. But of all the things that your subconscious mind
So
can
this
do,
is our mind, which can do so much, right? We marvel at these supercomputers, but the mind is really
it
Even all the
can't.
computers combined in the world today don't have the power of one single mind.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I can see that. So this is the next question. Are you a mind with a body, or a body with a mind? Let's watch this.
Look at your hand. How do you know it's really yours? It seems obvious, unless you've experienced the rubber hand illusion. In this experiment, a dummy hand is placed in front of you and your real hand is hidden behind a screen. Both are simultaneously stroked with a paintbrush. No matter how much you remind yourself the dummy hand isn't yours, you eventually start to feel like it is, and inevitably flinch when it's threatened with a knife. That may just be a temporary trick, but it speaks to a larger truth. Our bodies, the physical, biological parts of us, and our minds, the thinking, conscious aspects, have a complicated, tangled relationship. Which one primarily defines you, yourself? Are you a physical body that only experiences thoughts and emotions as a result of biochemical interactions in the brain? That would be a body with a mind. Or is there some non-physical part of you that's pulling the strings but could live outside of your biological body? That would be a mind with a body. That takes us to an old question of whether the body and mind are two separate.
So we can see that these are questions that scientists and philosophers have been thinking about. What's going on here? Is the mind simply just another physical part of us? Is it just a biological, physical entity? Or is there something more that is animating us? And this discussion about the body, this glove hand illusion, I was just thinking about it. This shows that just by knowing that it's an illusion doesn't take us away from the illusion, right? We need something else, because we may, even though we may understand it theoretically, that this hand is not mine, but because of my projection into this world of illusion, knowledge itself is not enough. The transformation has to happen at the level of realization. And that's where the heart comes in. And that's why just knowledge or philosophy is sometimes not enough. So we're not going to watch these videos, but it's basically, now we are taking a different approach to this discussion of the mind, which is that right now in this era that we are living in, mental health is actually one of the biggest things that psychologists and people are dealing with or talking about, because it's even for the millennials, they're finding out that they're leaving their jobs in great numbers, and the reason they cite is mental health concern. And we are seeing that more and more, that even people who are very young, or young as in like 12-year-olds, 10-year-olds, but even like youth, I mean, they're right out of college, they have their whole future waiting for them, and yet they're experiencing this sense of emptiness, this sense of futility, this sense of what for, and not able to keep up with their jobs. So this is definitely a concern. And we saw that
Young
even when our
people
son went
are
to college, which is considered to be quite a reputed college. But what we saw during just the first 2 semesters, so many kids with such amazing credentials just taking their life, right? So it makes you wonder, what is going on, and why is it that even though we have so many facilities, so much entertainment, so much of everything, and yet we are so affected by this lack of mental peace. And so, these are the statistics provided by the National Alliance on Mental Illness. It says that nearly 1 in 5 American is affected by mental illness in a given year. And 55% of American adults with a mental health condition received no mental health services in the previous year as of 2014. So, and here it says women experience depression at roughly twice the rate of men. So these are very heavy and very difficult things to even think about, that yes, we are dealing with something that we seem to really not understand what is the way, how do we deal with this? So, this is so perhaps an understanding of what the body is and what the mind is and what our self, our consciousness is, might give us some perspective. Again, these are complex issues, and there might be situations where we definitely need professional help. But at the same time, we have a friend who's a psychiatrist, and she says that even in her work, she finds that any any person that comes in, she says, this is one of the things I actually suggest to them, that, if they can find some kind of a spiritual practice, because she says that if people work at that level, then even if they have to come for treatment, they don't have to stay on that treatment for too long, because she says that, it just helps them, if as soon as they start. So it's a good idea to supplement, or whatever care that we might be receiving with spirituality, with meditation, because that's one way that we can really, really pacify the mind.
And also seeing the separation between us and the mind,
Mm.
because we start seeing the mind as ourselves, and whatever the mind says or whatever the mind feels, we think that it is me. Then we fall into the trap of basically being dragged by the mind.
Yeah.
But if we understand this difference, as Bhagavad Gita explains, that what is our relationship with the mind? Are we the body? Are we the mind? Or are we something even different than that? So this is what this slide shows, that how we are. It shows that our gross body is just an outer covering. Inside the gross body, we have another covering, which is covering the soul. Soul is the real self, which is different from the mind. The subtle body is the mind, intelligence, and false ego, which we don't see, but we see the effect of that. And what we see outside is just the gross body. So you see there are three entities here: the soul, the subtle body, which is the mind, intelligence, and the gross body. So the three-layer existence we have.
It's so much easier for us, isn't it, to understand and accept that we are not this gross body.
Yeah.
But it's so much harder for us to not identify with our thoughts. We really, whatever the mind tells us, we think it is us. So the practice of meditation is actually observing the mind. That's one part of it, right? Observing our thoughts as being separate from who we are, and not believing everything the mind is telling us. So that's one way we create that separation. And ultimately, this process of connecting with Krishna and chanting and reading and coming in touch with the spiritual sound vibration, it completely removes that sort of that glue, because there's a glue that is connecting. Because if you look at this, the first thought that comes into the mind is, hey, this is matter, this is matter, this is antimatter or non-material. Then what is it that connects the soul to all of this? What is that yoke, right, that is binding the two together? And so that glue is actually the false ego. And the false ego is very, very subtle. Think about it. It's not something gross. It's not like a rope that is tying us, but it's something. And what is that gross false ego? It's just a conception. It's just a conception that I am matter, that I am this mind, I am this intelligence, I am this body. This is my identity. And that is what is dragging us around. So when we come across this knowledge, what it does, that at one level, at the level of the mind and the intelligence, we start to become free. But then that's still not enough, because there is still our consciousness, which is situated within the realm of the heart. So when we practice bhakti, then even at the level of the heart, then it becomes a reality for us. So here is another, we've already talked about this, and many of you probably have already seen it, but we'll simply just repeat it, that the five senses are the five horses here, and the mind is actually the reins, right? And the higher intelligence, or the buddhi, is the chariot driver, and the consciousness or the self, the Atman, is this person who's sitting on this chariot, who's been dragged around by these five horses. Now, if the mind is not controlled, right? If the reins are not within the hands of the intelligence, then what will happen are these horses will just go crazy, and they'll just drag us in places that we don't really want to go. So we can see that, and here is what's happening with the self. The self has given the power of attorney to this intelligence in the mind. So when we say, I just want to clarify this, intelligence and the mind, they're actually clubbed together. Sometimes they're clubbed separately, but intelligence is simply an aspect of the mind, which is meant for discrimination. But they're actually one and the same, in another sense. So the consciousness has actually handed over the power of attorney to the mind and told the mind that, hey, I trust you completely. I know that you're my best friend, even though it's not. Right. So I know that you'll just take me wherever you want to go. I'll just go along with you. And so now the mind has full power. It's been powered by this self, by this consciousness, and so then just runs crazy, and it's never satisfied, and the poor little jiva or the atman is just dragged around in this way. So yeah, we already did this. I will skip this. So the other way we can understand this difference between this body, this mind, and the self is through this hardware and the software. So you have the hardware, which is the body, and the software is like what's embedded in it, right? And that's like our subtle body. And the user, of course, is the consciousness.
So the software is the operating system like Windows or Apple, iOS, that's running this body or running this hardware. And the applications like Microsoft Word and antivirus, Excel, those are like our desires that we have. And the antivirus is a spiritual process to remove anything bad that can damage the operating system and software. So this is kind of an analogy to understand the mind-body interaction.
Here is another one which I really like is, this idea that this mind is also compared to smoke. So fire has smoke, right? Now, if fire has smoke, then the effect of fire is that much reduced. If you put a pot on top of a fire which is filled with smoke, then it's not going to give out that much heat. And at the same time, what the smoke does, it actually prevents us from being able to see the fire. So it acts as a screen, right? And we can't see the fire. So in the same way, the mind, when there is no smoke, right, then what happens is you can see the fire clearly. So same way, when the mind is not polluted, or when the mind is not filled with all kinds of stuff in it, right, which is floating in that mind, then we can actually see ourselves through that clear fire, right? But when there's a lot of smoke, then we cannot actually see. So just going to skip this as well. Yeah, this is a really good point. So then now the question is that the mind can either be a window for us, a window where the panes are totally wiped clean and you can actually see through it, right? Like right now we are sitting here and our windows are right here and we can actually see through it and there's a beautiful lake outside. Or the mind can simply be a screen and it's simply projecting itself on that screen. And so whatever the mind tells us, we're just watching that.
And that is our perception of reality. That is a perception of who we are, who other people are, what this world is about. And so instead of using the mind to look within ourselves or to look outside to a near reality, we just get captured by whatever the mind says.
Yeah, because whatever the mind is telling, the mind is right now. So I don't think we talked about this, but the mind is actually a repository of all the previous impressions. Oh, it's coming up. Okay. This is really good. This is really good.
I mean, the question comes is that when we look at our physical
Can
body,
I just talk about the repository and then we can watch this? So just give me a minute. So
you go and say,
no, let's go there. Okay, so let's then watch this and then we'll get there.
So this is the question comes that where is the mind? Is the mind does the brain is the brain create consciousness, or mind is something separate from the brain?
Actually, this is a common theory that has existed for a long time, that there's nothing called the mind. It's essentially the brain, and whatever emotions we experience is just some kind of chemical reaction.
Right.
But more and more doctors and different scientists and neuroscientists are now recognizing that there is something beyond the brain, which continues to exist even when the brain is actually declared clinically dead. And that's actually one way that they're figuring out that, hey, there exists some consciousness which even when the brain is not functioning, it continues to exist, right?
And there is an observer beyond the dead brain.
It turns out there is a scientific revolution going on now about the mind-brain discussion, the relationship between the two, that is extraordinary. And I think it's going to lead to a complete shift in our worldview that is unprecedented. And this living in a mindful universe is really about that scientific revolution.
Are you discounting whether the brain controls consciousness?
No, I think what we would say is the brain is a reducing valve or filter that allows primordial consciousness in. That is, the brain is not the creator of it. You cannot explain all of the details of human experience, especially all the evidence for non-local consciousness, the evidence for things like reincarnation, past life memories in children, indicative of reincarnation, things like that, if you think the brain is the producer of consciousness.
So what is the producer?
Well, consciousness is what exists and generates the entire universe. It's the
this is
fundamental
my
ground state.
consciousness now, right?
It's all consciousness. It's all generated within consciousness. I mean, the thing to remember is we're under, we discuss in the book, what we call the supreme illusion, and that is that the brain and mind are very good at convincing us that all this stuff around us is out there. But what you're actually experiencing is a model deep within mind that is supposed to represent something that is out there. But I think that's where it's important to point out the mystery of quantum physics, because it...
okay, we couldn't hear anything, so we have no idea what he said. I mean, we have an idea, but you know.
But anyways, what he was saying is that the brain does not create consciousness. There is another entity which basically carries that.
Maybe somebody else can repeat this, you know? Yeah.
What did you guys hear?
What did you guys hear?
The last thing he was saying was that the brain does not create consciousness. It's a filter letting in the primal consciousness that creates the whole universe. And he said that it's the supreme illusion is that it's not, what we're seeing isn't out there. It's actually a model of something within us, right? I think.
Nice. Yeah, this
So
is
it's basically separating the brain from the mind.
Yeah, actually in Ayurveda, you know, which I studied, you know, my teacher actually explained it so well. He said the brain is the office of the mind. Because sometimes this question comes, right? Everything is really happening at this, you know, at this level. So yeah, you know, so you need an office. The mind needs, because the mind is subtle. It doesn't really have a physical location.
It doesn't have. It's like it's covering the soul. So in many ways, the mind is not actually in the brain. It's covering the soul, which is in the region of the heart. So.
But it's still animated. So it's, you know, the brain, it acts through the brain.
Right.
But in some cases, even if the brain is not active, you know, the mind is able to, you know, you can still perceive, and hence the near-death experiences and so many different.
So these are the functions of the mind. One of the things that mind does, it collects all the input from all the senses, and it creates a perception for us, and it simulates a reality. So the same, like different species, they may observe the same phenomena, but each species has a different perception of reality because their mind is different, and how the mind processes that stimuli from the sense objects is different. So whatever we are experiencing, whatever our perception or conception of this world or reality is basically what is created by the mind on the screen of the
Actually,
mind.
I was just thinking about that the other day, that like the cicadas, right? They have come at such a specific time, and their senses have perceived this world in a very sort of specific slice. They've never seen, you know, they've not seen the snow, right? They just appear at this time and they die within a month. So they don't know that there is a whole other reality that exists outside of this time and space.
Yeah.
Right. So in the same way, whatever reality we are experiencing, it's simply a combination, because we are humans. We have much more, I guess, in some ways more evolved. But who is to say that that's all there is?
Yeah, and our sense of reality also changes on what our mood is. For example, there is a game going on, and one set of followers, they are very happy, whereas the other set of followers, they're very dejected because their team is losing. So the same reality is perceived in two different ways because the mind is in a different state. And suddenly the game changes, and then the other party starts winning, and this team of followers, they become very happy. So it's continuously changing, even from moment to moment for us.
And so once again, so what the mind does is that it takes in all of this data, and then it creates a story around it, some kind of, you know, what we call logic, you know, puts it together, and then sees it as some form of reality, and then it does another thing, and then it accepts or rejects it and says this is good and this is bad. But they're both based around our perception of what's out there, right? So in that sense, it's extremely subjective.
So these are the main functions of the mind according to Bhagavad Gita. The first one is the perception that we discussed. It collects the input from the senses. The second important function of the mind is memory, storing the memory of our experiences. and recollecting them. So we all have experiences. That is a key function of the mind. Think about the past. What did I experience when we look at certain people, all our interactions with them in the past, they will just flash back, and then either we are happy or we are fearful or whatever, on guard.
And not just to speak about this lifetime, but even like if we carry some kind of inclinations or in some kind of natural responses, some natural fears, right, that we have carried since our childhood. Those are also memories that are stored in our subconscious mind from countless lifetimes.
So that's the point that we forgot to mention, that how when we die, when a living entity dies, it's just a body that is left behind. The body dies, but the soul moves on to another body with the same mind and same intelligence. So it's like the mind that we have now, we have had the same mind for millions of lifetimes, according to Bhagavad Gita.
Yeah.
It's the same mind that we are carrying. So all our phobias and our fears and our likes and dislikes, a lot of them are actually being carried by the mind from previous lifetimes.
Yeah, exactly, right?
Right.
And so, we don't know like where we are carrying it from, and how do you even like access. They also say that what we are actually seeing, the conscious self is such a small part of our complete self, right? There is so much that lies underneath that we cannot even access. And sometimes it may come out in our dream, where we may dream of something that we have experienced in some previous lifetime. And so this is the memory and the recollect, that it's just and
so it's like the mind which is collecting all the impressions, and in one sense all the garbage or all the toxins from all these previous lifetimes, and this is what we got.
This is what we got. And it's another way to look at it is like, if you have a mirror and if you just leave it in some place which is filled with dust, then every year it collects a new layer of dust. And so like you have these layers of like the sedimentary rocks, right? They're formed through layers and layers and layers.
Right.
So in the same way, and some of them, like what it gets fossilized, right? You get fossil remains from them. So in the same way, our consciousness has also collected these layers and layers and layers and layers of dust over it. And it's become like this thick fossilized piece of like hard rock.
It's like our artery is getting chalked up with cholesterol. It's getting thicker and thicker and thicker.
Yeah.
There is hardly any room for the blood to flow. And this is what the chanting does, is the process when we chant Hare Krishna or when we chant any other mantra, then what it does is it clears away all these toxins and all this dust that is accumulated in the channels of our mind, and it frees it. Those things are gone now forever, that we have accumulated since so many lifetimes.
Yeah.
There is no other way to clean the mind.
There is no other. I mean, sometimes people say, all right, I'm just going to become very quiet
or silent.
I'll just go into silence for whatever, 20 days, 30 days. It's good, but what we are not accounting for are the layers beneath that. The chatter of that external, that conscious mind is just, it's a tip of the iceberg. Then somebody could say, well, I'm just going to stay in the present moment. I'm just going to be in the here and the now. Yeah, this is all great stuff, but again, it's treating things at a very, 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 very superficial level. But because hey, underneath all of that, there is this whole big mountain that we are carrying, which is actually the cause of our countless lifetimes, and it's a cause of so much of stress. And so it needs something that can actually completely they say, like, sometimes they use sound to actually like to break mountains, to break rocks, right? So in the same way, we need something that can actually break down these walls that we have created that prevent us from seeing who we are. So here is another thing that the mind does. This is another functionality of the mind, which is that it thinks, it feels, and it wills in that sequence. So this is what the advertising industry actually capitalizes on, is this particular aspect of the mind. So thinking means that it comes in touch with something, it sees something, and then immediately there is a thinking, this is good. Right now, it's just at the thinking stage, like I'm just trying to take in that information and process it. But at some point, that thinking turns into feeling, which means that I start desiring and I start thinking, wouldn't that be nice to have that couch in my house? Or, wouldn't it be nice if da-da-da? So that's like the feeling part. And then once the feeling kicks in, that's when the willing part really, really takes on, because now the intelligence kicks in and says, all right, you want this?
Yeah, and then the willing is like committing to a certain thing, and then the intelligence kicks in to say, okay, how do I make it happen now?
Yeah, so then we'll talk about this intelligence. It's very, very interesting. So this intelligence, now the relationship between the intelligence and the mind, because I think by now we've sort of understood the relationship of the mind with the body. But here is another important aspect within us, which is our intelligence. So the intelligence is actually compared to a mother, And the mind is compared to this 2-year-old toddler mind, toddler who's constantly going, no, right? Or it says, I want this, I want this, and I want that, and that, and if it doesn't get it, it throws a tantrum in the middle of a grocery store. So the mother can either be a permissive mother, and she can say to the babe, to the 2-year-old, that, oh, you poor thing, oh, is this what you want? All right, we'll have candies before dinner, no worries. Or I'll say, all right, you don't want to study, that's fine, just do whatever you want, right? So that's one way that the intelligence can deal with the mind. And the other is that the intelligence can actually become can be much more in charge of the mind, and say, all right, we're going to do this, but let's first do this. So it takes on the mind, the little child, and learns how to train the child so that the child can actually benefit itself. So that's the function of the
So
intelligence.
the mind should not take over the intelligence.
The mind should not take over the intelligence. Rather, actually, even in that hierarchy which we discussed in the second chapter, the intelligence is higher than the mind.
So it becomes very dangerous situation for the living entity when the mind takes over the intelligence.
What's the time? We have time? Okay. So the mind is also sometimes compared to a monkey. And some, spiritual practitioners, they say, no, it's not just a monkey. It's actually a drunken monkey. So we can imagine how crazy, that would be. So this is again another verse from the Srimad Bhagavatam. This is 5:11-17. It says, this uncontrolled mind is the greatest enemy of the living entity. If one neglects it or gives it a chance, it will grow more and more powerful and will become victorious. Although it is not factual, it is very strong. Think about that. It covers the constitutional position of the soul. O king, please try to conquer this mind by the weapon of service to the lotus feet of the spiritual master and of the supreme personality of Godhead. Do this with great care.
So I guess I really like the point here. If one neglects it or gives it a chance. So sometimes I feel that my mind has a lot of power, but if you don't give it a chance, then there is no power. It becomes completely powerless in that very moment when we don't give it a chance.
Yeah, I think somebody once approached Prabhupada and said, Prabhupada, how do I chant and control the mind? Prabhupada said, where's the question of the mind? Just chant and hear, right? So the point is that the mind is only powerful as long as we give it that much life. The mind actually does not have a life of its own. It's life that we have given it. It's power that we have given it. So once we start recognizing that, then we start realizing, oh, this thing is not my master.
And I think the best treatment for the mind, the Sanskrit word that is used here is upeksha. Upeksha means neglect. Just neglect. If the mind says, I want this, I want this, I want this, I really want this, I can't live without this, just okay, well, I'll give it to you tomorrow. I'll give it to you. So it is said that if something is harmful to us, then we should tell the mind that, okay, I'll do it tomorrow or day after tomorrow.
Procrastination.
Procrastinate something that is not good for us. And if something is good for us, then we should do it immediately.
This is another word. This is Bhagavad Gita, where Arjuna is finally telling Krishna that the mind is restless, turbulent, obstinate, and very strong, O Krishna. And to subdue it, I think, is more difficult than controlling the wind. This is Arjuna, claiming that very, very difficult.
Mindfulness.
Yeah, we'll go ahead because we can't watch it anyways. Oh, this was cute. This is how they train the mind. Hold on. Is this a video? No.
I think you have to show it from here because it was not playing there.
Yeah, let's watch this. This is kind of cute. So this is how they train the monkeys. Because like we said, the mind is like our monkey.
When teaching our monkeys, use positive reinforcement and imitation-based training. It really is as simple as monkey see, monkey do.
Do this. We break down every task into very small, easy, fun steps for them to learn so that they don't get frustrated through the process.
Do this. Good job, Dylan. You go fetch?
The words that we choose to identify certain tasks are very specific. We tend...
It's just a image with the...
Okay. I have to share it separately, looks like.
When teaching our monkeys, Helping Hand staff use positive reinforcement and imitation-based training. It really is as simple as monkey see, monkey do.
Do this. We break down every task into very small, easy, fun steps for them to learn so that they don't get frustrated through the process.
Do this. Good job, Dylan. You go fetch?
The words that we choose to identify certain tasks are very specific. We tend to choose words that have very strong sounds.
So for example, when we teach a light switch is just kind of long and awkward to say, so we call it sun.
Sun.
And that's just a quick, easy word that doesn't sound like any of their other commands that they're taught.
Can you do bucket? Beautiful job. You flip. Nice job.
It's really important for Helping Hand staff to set realistic expectations with our applicants for what monkeys can and can't do. We never want to teach them a task that if they make a mistake, that it can't be undone. On the other hand, Helping Hand staff focuses on those little everyday tasks that are important to recipients. Something as simple as picking up a phone or a remote control can give somebody a level of independence that they don't have without the monkey.
So it's amazing, right? They're actually using words and simple words. And that's what a mantra is, right? They're simple words that the mind can latch onto and recognize that, oh, I can understand this. It's not complex. And Prabhupada says that actually one doesn't even have to actually understand the meaning of the word. That's another amazing thing, that one doesn't have to, just like if you touch fire, the fire will actually make you warm, right? Or it'll burn you. So in the same way, just by coming in contact with the sound, automatically.
It is undoubtedly very difficult to curb the restless mind, but it is possible by suitable practice and by detachment. So that's what we're doing, suitable practice. We need a suitable practice that has that inherent power, which is much more than the mind. If you pick a practice that itself is less powerful than the mind, then the mind will prevail.
Yeah.
Right. So we need something bigger than the mind.
Or another thing we could do, and this is like, we've I think mentioned this before, that say if you tell the mind, what we tend to do is we want to control the mind, but then we go back to the mind and we say, my dear mind, can you tell me the way how I can control you?
What should we do?
What should we do? So now I again accept my mind as my guru, as my teacher. Now the mind is has no intention of setting us free. He has kept us in captivity for the longest time. And no captor is just going to let us scot-free.
It's like asking the guard, okay, can you give me the key so I can get out?
Yeah, there's no way, right? So now this is why, we cannot go back to the mind and depend on the mind solely for our freedom. We need something else that can actually, and in the beginning, and this is why we need this detachment, because in the beginning, the mind is going to throw a fit. We have to expect that the mind is not going to be the happiest. It will be happy, but at the same time, it's going to also throw its own tantrums. No, but this is boring, but why should I, or why, or this, or that, or so many distractions, but I need to do something else right now. So this is how the mind has dragged us through countless lifetimes. So this is why we need detachment and superior knowledge. And this is how what we are doing with the study of Bhagavad Gita is we are sharpening this intelligence. It's like a sword. So we have also studied in Srimad Bhagavatam, right, that we can cut this knot that is binding us to this world using a sword. And that sword needs to be really sharpened so that it can actually cut through. If it is blunt, it cannot do anything. So by studying and by understanding this knowledge, we are actually sharpening our intelligence so that whenever the mind starts to again, drag us around, then we can use that intelligence to say no. And this is called, this is why it's actually like a discipline in the beginning. Later it is not. Later it is natural. But in the beginning, it feels like it's a discipline.
The spiritual sound is the best way to transform the mind.
I think, because we can't watch it, we don't know what's in there. We know what's in there, but it's hard to.
Mantras are, they're not descriptive things. They're like, boulders of energetic sound.
There was some part of me was like, oh, this is way too hippie, but in the same time, I felt I needed a big change in my life. I needed to find a completely new relationship with myself.
The mantra is an amazing medicine for the mind.
It's not about becoming something else. It's not about even losing yourself. It's about becoming yourself.
Mantra can help you to make the mind totally in silence. When there are no vibration, then you can see yourself who you are.
I was searching for something that made sense. The American vision of needing someone, getting money, all of that. And still, it was like I was empty inside.
We're seeing a shift in the function of a very essential structure in the brain, the thalamus, that probably changes the way we see reality.
The bottom line is making that connection is what giving me the power to actually exist, even in this realm of things.
1, 2, 3, 4. Karuna, Sagarima, Karuna, Sagarima. Hey!
Bhakti yoga and meditation saved my life.
I don't know, this was the
This video shows how, because sometimes we think that, oh, mantra meditation, how do I believe that it actually has an impact on the mind, my brain? So there are so many scientific studies that actually show that the impact on our brain.
My co-author of the book Altered Traits is a neuroscientist, Richard Davidson. He has a lab at the University of Wisconsin. It's a very large lab. He has dedicated scanners. He has about 100 people working there. And he was able to do some remarkable research where he flew Olympic level meditators who live in Nepal or India, typically, or some in France. He flew them over to the lab and put them through a protocol in his brain scanners and did state-of-the-art tests. And the results were just astounding. We found, for example, or he found that their brainwaves are really different. Perhaps the most remarkable finding in the Olympic level meditators has to do with what's called a gamma wave. All of us get gamma for a very short period when we solve a problem we've been grappling with, even if it's something that's vexed us for months. We get about a half second of gamma. It's the strongest wave in the EEG spectrum. We get it when we bite into an apple or imagine biting into an apple. And for a brief period, a split second, inputs from taste, sound, smell, vision, all of that come together in that imagined bite into the apple. But that lasts very, very short period in an ordinary EEG. What was stunning was that the Olympic level meditators, these are people who've done up to 62,000 lifetime hours of meditation, their brainwave shows gamma very strong all the time as a lasting trait, just no matter what they're doing. It's not a state effect, it's not during their meditation alone, but it's just their everyday state of mind. We actually have no idea what that means experientially. Science has never seen it before.
So we can see, right,
We
that
also-
how, maybe this we'll do next time, the Song of the Avanti Brahman. So we can have some time for discussion. So we can see that this kind of mantra meditation that we are trying to do every day is very, very powerful, and it has the power to free the mind. Actually, the word mantra itself literally means that which can free the mind, which can free us from the tyranny of the mind. And in this way, we can become, we can realize our fullest potential. We can become free from the stress, anxiety, unnecessary, load that we carry within. We can silence our mind. And ultimately, what we can do is we can realize who we are and our deepest loving relationship, which is actually what the mind is actually trying to find in this world. The mind is on a lookout for rasa. It's looking for pleasure, it's looking for taste.
You just got addicted to the wrong taste.
Yeah, but it just got, it just thought that I'm going to find the taste in all these different things. So when it comes in contact with the sweet taste of Krishna, then it is completely satisfied. And in that way, the mind doesn't have to be repressed anymore, or it doesn't have to be artificially subjugated, but it just naturally it becomes drawn. Sometimes the mind is also, there are so many prayers where, it's described that let my mind be just naturally drawn to you, just like the river is just naturally, it's flowing towards the ocean. That's where we want to get through this practice of bhakti, where our mind just naturally is attracted. It's naturally addicted. It's been addicted to all these things. Let's now, let me get addicted to the sweet nectar of Krishna's beautiful form. So with that, we'll pause here and see if you guys have any thoughts, reflections. Yes, Malar, go ahead.
Thanks, Lokaji, Vidarbhaji. It's a beautiful presentation.
Thank you.
So yeah, it sounds like it's a very most complex and precious creation by the Almighty. Just it's very complex. Listening to all the mind and intelligence and how to control our soul and everything. But my question is like, why one develops negative thoughts and how to control the negative thoughts? So we have, all the time we are running so many things in our mind, and but sometimes we do feel that always, we think about the negative thoughts. Is it based on the experience what we go through, or is something, some chemical reaction, or if you can throw some light.
It's the nature of the mind.
Yeah.
It's the nature of the mind because it's not satisfied. It's actually one of the austerities of the mind is satisfaction. So right now the mind is not in a satisfied condition, and it's carrying. So when something is not full, right, it's experiencing this scarcity, this inadequacy. Whatever we give it, it's not good enough. Whatever we provide, we're providing it 24 hours, 7 days a week. We're working so hard to serve this mind. It's our master. It's like, all right, I'll do this for you. You want this? All right, I will travel, thousands of miles just to get you that. But then what happens is, actually, George Bernard Shaw said it once so beautifully. He says there are two tragedies in this world. One is not getting what you want, and the other is getting it. So either way, the mind is not satisfied. So that's why there's this constant negative talk, because nothing, it's like if you take a fish out of water and you put it on this best beach chair and you give it the best suntan oil and you get it the best Coke bottle, still the fish is constantly, it's very restless. It's very unhappy. But you take the fish and you put it back in that water, then the fish is perfectly happy. So all of this negative talk is really because the mind hasn't found what it's looking for. Once it finds it, then it's like, hey, now I'm happy.
Yeah, what is a negative thought? Usually it is something about ourselves, that I'm not good, and or it is about somebody else. That person is not good. He is my enemy. He always tries to put me down, and blah, 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 blah. This is what the mind creates, right?
Or the situation is not good.
Or the situation is not good. I'm stuck in this situation. My job is not good, and I don't have enough money, or I have this problem and that problem. All these are negative thoughts.
Or this person did, we forgot to mention one very good point.
Yeah.
That the mind actually runs on, the bird of the mind flies on two wings, the past and the future. So the two things that actually trouble the mind the most is lamentation and hankering. Lamentation means that this happened to me in the past. Why did this have to happen? This person caused me so much pain. That is the lamentation from the past. And the future is hankering. I wish my life turns out this way. I wish this would happen. I wish I can become, da, da, da. So all of these are the two things that the mind is constantly latching on to.
When we understand the true nature of self, even when we start understanding, that is nothing to do with me. Whatever the mind is thinking is nothing to do. I'm separate from my mind. All these negative thoughts, I'm also separate from them. And even if something like that happened, I can be an observer. I don't have to be affected by it. And I am a spiritual being. much mightier than the mind, much mightier than anything else. And it has nothing to do with me. It's nothing to do with me. So once you detach, so detachment is a very powerful tool to get rid of these negative thoughts. So once you detach yourself, learn about ourselves, who we truly are, then we can start seeing ourselves as not as some victim, that we are not the victim of the situation. We are not the victim of anybody else. We are the spirit soul is loved by Krishna immensely, and I have everything that I need. I'm not lacking anything. And then we detach ourselves from all these external things.
It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
yeah.
Thank you so much. Yeah.
Yes, thank you. Any other?
Christina,
go ahead.
Yes. I jotted some things down that came to me throughout the presentation, and so I had this distinct experience when I was like 14 years old, where I became like disassociated with myself, and I realized like that I was in my body, and it was a weird. It was kind of like an anxious moment where it freaked me out. And I kind of pieced that together with like how, you know, how like when we're infants or we're young children and we're kind of living off instinctually, but then as we grow older, we become more aware of our mind, our body, and our like human experience. And then like just understanding that I've dealt with anxiousness and depression throughout my adult life, and even I guess you could say as a child, with the misuse of that consciousness or the misuse of the confidence in that consciousness, you know, and then practicing bhakti, and then also having roots in my spirituality that I was raised on. I think that kind of helps, because sometimes when I'm in the state of not awake, but I'm still asleep, I'll have like motivating words or informative words, which I know is not necessarily my mind, because my mind is not actually working and going yet, you know? And it's like the information that comes through sometimes is remembered and it's sometimes not remembered. But the things that I follow with what those words that come to my mind in the morning are like sometimes so beautiful that I'll forget it. And then also I wanted to know, when someone daydreams, when they like completely space out with no thought in mind, but they're just kind of like in a state of staring and not thinking at all, like how that space is, I don't know where I'm really going with this, but these are the things that like I just thought of when we were talking about this.
Yeah, I was, when you talked about the daydreaming part, I was just thinking that, we can have those moments when we are not consciously thinking, but the function of the mind is at many different levels. There's a lot going on at a subconscious level that is actually occupying our mental space. And there's a lot of activity going on there. And so that's the reason why that even when we sort of quiet the mind, which we can, we're still not able to actually access the real nature of the self, because there is a lot of in-between layers there that need to be cleared away. And so even though it is helpful, like for example, when we sleep, we talked about that as well. There's a kind of sleep where you are dreaming. So that's like active mental activity going on, right? So there's a lot of activity, but there can also be a kind of sleep where you're not really dreaming. It's a dreamless sleep, but that's still material, right? It's still not, we still haven't attained, but even though it kind of quiets the mind for some time, so that's a good experience, right? When the mind is not present so much, we feel peaceful. But there's a lot more there.
And the nature of the mind is to dream. It's basically pulls together all the memories and the desires, and it dreams during the day, it dreams during the night.
Actually, Prabhupada says that. He says it's like waking dream and sleeping dream. Right. Our existence during the day is like a waking dream. We're going through the day thinking, I'm a woman, I'm a man, I'm American, I'm Indian, I'm this, I'm that. That's sort of a dream for the self, because the self actually has nothing to do with all of those identities. So in that sense, this is also a dream-like state.
Yes. And sometimes I've found that it could be scary, but that's why I appreciate the teachings of Bhakti and this association with everyone here, because I feel like it makes it less scary, you know, and it actually gives us direction.
Yeah,
It does.
it does. It's really amazing. So thank you so much.
We have been missing you for the last few days. I hope everything is all right.
Yes, I was going through some personal thing, so I was like in a state of stillness, really. But I am very glad to be back. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else?
Gabrielle wanted to say something.
Oh, go ahead, Gabriel.
Canela, any thoughts from you? You always have something interesting to say.
Well, I was just thinking, I guess, about like meditation, because like just how difficult it is to meditate, like period, just because of the monkey mind. You know? Like even on your best day, it's impossible to tame, or it can feel that way. And then like you don't want to meditate on whatever garbage is going through your head, you know? And so I guess that is one thing that I found more refreshing about the chanting, is that, you know, it's a place to put my mind, so that I'm giving it something productive to do, productive to focus on. You know what I'm saying? Instead of just being quiet and just allowing, you know, whatever thoughts to come in, and then, you know, feeling guilty for thinking it, and then, you know, I mean, it's literally just like a rabbit hole. So, yeah, so that's essentially all I was.
That's nice. Yeah. Yeah, and that's what the chanting does. It's, you know, it's aligning ourselves so that we can be attracted by the big magnet. That's all. You know, we are right now, we are attracted to so many other things, but we just want to put ourselves in such a situation, because Krishna is the big magnet. And that's the meaning of the word Krishna. It means the great attractor. And so when he attracts the mind, then the mind is automatically, it's subdued. Right? So two more. Who else?
Gabrielle, go ahead.
Gabrielle.
Hi, thank you so much for this presentation. I thought it was just so uplifting. I'm hoping that I think you said you might start the next session with more about the scientific evidence about you know, or the mind scans of those who were meditating at a gamma level. If not, if you could share links to that research.
Yes.
I'll thank you so much. Also, I wanted to share an experience. It's kind of strange, so just hold on. So I am not a pro athlete, but and I'm working on it. In my spare time, I do a lot of different sports. And one experience I had was just amazing. I was in the middle of a tournament, and I feel like I experienced a different dimension, because, you know, it was like the Matrix, where suddenly, you know, in my mind, in my reality, everything was slow, and I could hear myself think about the next action I was going to take. And I did it in such an instant, but I could hear myself talking to myself about what I should do. And it only took a second, but in my mind, in my reality, it lasted enough for me to tell myself what to do to, you know, make this action in a martial arts setting, and to get the point or whatever. It's hard to imagine, it's hard to explain, but I felt like I was in another dimension, and this only happened in a second, but I was experiencing it in about 15 seconds. I can't explain it, but it was amazing. And I felt like that must have been a gamma
Yeah.
some sort of gamma dimensional thing where I was talking to myself. Anyway, I haven't only experienced it once, but it was such an amazing point in time that I don't know how to re-experience in it, but I imagine that that meditating is something like that, you know.
Yeah.
It could also very well have been a connection with the super soul. Sometimes you get a glimpse of the super soul, and there's a communication with the super soul, and that moment is like, as you're describing, although it lasted for a second, but it was like a lot of time that you felt. So it could also be that.
Yeah, and that's the whole process of meditation is, right? I mean, like he was saying that you increase those gamma waves, right? And so actually later on in that video, he talks about how those people have an astonishing amount of compassion. So that's another aspect that we will find as we practice this chanting. Yeah.
Yeah, by the way, we're sharing all the links to the videos, and Anshul, correct me if I'm wrong. We are sharing them in the Google Classroom, right?
Yes, Prabhuji. Yes,
Okay.
we are
So
sharing.
if you go to your Google Classroom, then all the links for all the sessions that we do, all of them are shared there, so you can access them.
All right. Thank you very much, and have a great evening, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So maybe we can also,
We'll wrap it up
we'll
here.
wrap
It's
it here.
already 9:10,
Yeah.
so
Okay.
thank you.
See you. Thank you.
So next session will be a yoga ladder. What are the different systems of yoga? And
And we also welcome you to join us for our Bhagavatam, the
we
Srimad
are
Bhagavatam.
studying this exciting, wonderful wisdom text, 5,000 years old. And it really goes into the great detail of the science of the self.
The book itself is actually the way that we can control the mind.
Yeah.
Because it's it says, the text itself says that this actually can provide us that taste that we're looking for. So if you guys have any time, at 10 a.m. EST, do join, whenever you can. I think it'll be wonderful.
So the Zoom ID is posted on our WhatsApp group. Thank you.
Thank you. See you guys. Hare Krishna.
Thank you.
Hare Krishna. Thank you.
Hare Krishna.